Chapter 7. Morgan had a really restful sleep. In fact, it was the best rest he'd had in a long time, since Jenny's overdose, if he was being honest. He sat in bed for a moment, registering the silence. That's when it hit him: no crying. No screaming. No night terrors. He hadn't been woken up at all last night. By the time he headed down for breakfast, the scent of something warm and buttery drifted through the air. He turned the corner into the dining room, expecting to find Nan directing the staff. But what he saw stopped him in his tracks. Jenny was at the stove, wearing a light robe over a cotton dress, flipping pancakes while a plate of crispy bacon and hash browns sat on the counter beside her. "Jenny?" Morgan blinked, surprised. "You're cooking?" She turned, a little out of breath but smiling. "Nan helped me," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I just felt like doing something normal." He stared at her for a second longer, then crossed the room and took his seat at the head of the long dining table. It was still a strange image: Jenny, at the stove, humming softly, acting like things weren't falling apart just days ago. Jake came in with Morgan's planner, flipping a page as he spoke. "You've got a signing at Lancaster Corp for the quarterly release forms, then another batch from Colin Corp's legal. No meetings today unless you want to review the legal summary for the new distribution channels." Morgan glanced up from his coffee and looked at Jenny, who was just settling beside him at the table. "Actually," he said, clearing his throat, "if there are no meetings, how about we go to the city center later? Lunch, just the two of us. Maybe stop by the boutique near the park after?" Jenny blinked in surprise, her fork pausing midair. "Really?" He nodded. "Yeah. I could use the break. And I thought you might like some fresh air." Her smile returned, this time softer, more genuine. "I'd like that," she said. "Good," Morgan said, eyes on her longer than he meant to. Jake, already scribbling into the schedule, didn't comment, but Morgan caught the faintest hint of a smirk as he turned away. After Morgan left, Mandy stood in front of the open wardrobe, her eyes wide as she took it all in. Jenny's closet was a dream: rows of delicate fabrics, soft silks, structured coats, and evening dresses that looked like they belonged on runways. Each hanger whispered of a life Mandy had only seen in magazines. She trailed her fingers across them, finally settling on something simple but elegant: a soft white dress that cinched at the waist and fell just above her knees, paired with a powder blue cardigan that added a fresh touch. She chose a pair of pearl-studded stud earrings and slipped her feet into flat nude-colored shoes, comfortable but still refined. The final touch was a small sparkly clutch with a gold chain strap that shimmered even in the low light. She checked herself in the mirror with a smile. At Lancaster Building. Morgan stepped into his office with a quiet sigh, Jake following closely behind. The familiar scent of leather and coffee grounded him. It was going to be a long morning. A stack of documents from both Lancaster Group and Colin Corporation sat waiting for him, neatly arranged in order of urgency. He rolled up his sleeves and got to work, signing briskly as Jake read out the highlights. The rhythm was only interrupted when the door opened without a knock. "Morgan," said Harlan Avery, one of the longest-standing investors in Lancaster Group. Morgan looked up, surprised but composed. "Harlan. To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Was in the building. Thought I'd stop by." The older man's voice was smooth, but there was a sharpness to his gaze. He stepped in without waiting to be invited, flipping open a leather folder. "I've been reviewing some of the quarterly comparisons. Seems your wife's company continues to outperform Lancaster by a mile." Morgan closed the file in front of him slowly, not rising to the bait. "I'm aware. Not saying you're slacking off," Harlan said with a half-smile. "Just that it might be time to pay more attention to your father's company. Your name's on the door, after all." Morgan's expression didn't change, but there was a tension in the set of his jaw. The Lancaster Group had once been the pride of his family, founded from scratch by his father and mother in their prime. It rose fast, too fast, and then plateaued. By the time Morgan graduated from university, it was already drowning in debt. Everyone in the investor circle knew that story. No one talked about how much work it took just to keep it from collapsing entirely. Lancaster's not collapsing, Morgan said calmly. It just needs time. Harlan gave a slow nod, eyes scanning the room like he was measuring more than numbers. We trust you, Morgan. You've been cleaning up your father's mess for years now. Just don't let the name fade while your wife's company becomes the real empire. Morgan didn't respond right away. He glanced at the documents on his desk, one pile for Lancaster, one for Cullen. 2 empires. 2 legacies. Both on his shoulders. Thanks for the drop-in, Harlan, he said finally. I'll keep that in mind. Harlan gave a short nod and let himself out, the door clicking shut behind him. Morgan said. He looked down at the papers. Let's finish this. I've got a lunch to get to. The shopping center stretched out like a modern palace, over 150 stores, sprawling food courts, quaint cafes, high-end restaurants, a grocery section, and even a gardening center tucked away near the west wing. Jenny stepped out of the Lancaster family van, clutching her clutch delicately as she looked around. Pulling out her phone, she dialed Morgan. Honey, I'm here at the shopping center. Where are you? She asked, adjusting the strap of her gold-chained clutch. I'm just arriving, in fact. I already see you, Morgan replied smoothly, and hung up. She looked up and spotted him stepping out of the black SUV. He looked tall, sharp, composed, as always. But the moment Jenny walked up to him and greeted him with a soft kiss on the cheek, Morgan's gaze narrowed. Are you cold? He asked, tone casual but watchful. Or are you not feeling well? Jenny blinked. No, I feel fine. Why do you ask? Morgan didn't answer right away. Instead, he slowly brushed the back of his hand against her forehead, eyes locked on her attire, a white dress, a powder blue cardigan, flat shoes, and pearl studs glinting in her ears. His instincts bristled. Jenny never wore a cardigan unless the air was biting, or unless something was off. And flats? She usually wore heels, graceful, elegant ones. She loved being tall beside him, even if it meant enduring sore feet. This felt unfamiliar. Jake noticed it too. He glanced at Morgan briefly, silently acknowledging the subtle shift. But Jenny, or rather, Mandy inside Jenny, smiled brightly. I'm fine. Really. In fact, I'm quite hungry. What did you have in mind for lunch? Morgan studied her for a second longer before relaxing slightly. How about your favorite bistro? Mandy searched quickly through Jenny's memories. Ah, yes. That cozy little place with the warm lighting and sizzling plates. Perfect. Sounds lovely. At the bistro, the scent of herbs and searing meat filled the air. Mandy practically lit up as she ordered a steak drenched in rich gravy, served on a hot, simmering plate. It was one of Jenny's old favorites, but to Mandy, it tasted like something out of a dream. Morgan watched her eat, his expression softening as he stirred his coffee. It's been months since we last ate out, hasn't it? Mandy, nodded, her mouth too full to speak, her eyes crinkling at the corners. She was genuinely enjoying herself. But something across the restaurant caught her eye, a shoe store. Not just any shoe store, the store she used to press her nose against as a teenager, dreaming of owning just one pair of those sky-high heels with the glittering straps. She paused mid-bite, eyes gleaming with quiet longing. Morgan, half scrolling through his phone, caught the subtle shift in her expression. He followed her gaze and saw the shop. After their meal, he was back on a call, clearly trying to wrap up a conversation. Still, he reached out and gently placed his hand over the phone's mic. If you want to go in, go ahead. I'll catch up with you. Mandy didn't hesitate. All right, she said, slipping out of the booth. As she walked toward the shoe store, there was a quiet bounce in her step, a flicker of who she once was, finally getting to taste the life she'd only ever imagined. Morgan and Jake watched from the bistro patio as Jenny made her way across the promenade. She paused at the entrance of the store, casting a glance over her shoulder, as if expecting Morgan to follow, before she pushed the door open and stepped inside. To Mandy, it felt like the gates of heaven had opened. She walked into the boutique with wide eyes and quiet awe, each display case like a sacred altar. And then she saw it. The shoes. It sat on a mirrored pedestal in the center of the store like a crown jewel, a high-heeled T-strap sandal in vibrant fuchsia pink and silver. The toe and heel were covered in tiny rhinestones that shimmered like frost under the soft store lights. The ankle strap was dainty and metallic, fastened with a tiny diamond-shaped buckle. It was fierce, feminine, and impossible to ignore. Mandy's heart fluttered. She gently lifted the shoe from its perch, carried it to a velvet bench, and slipped it onto her foot. It fit like it had been made for her. Standing up, she twirled in front of the full-length mirror, the rhinestones catching the light like glittering stars. It was a dream she had only seen in magazines, one she never thought she'd live. Morgan, watching from the restaurant, saw her smiling in the mirror as the waiter returned his card. But the moment quickly turned. A woman in a black uniform walked up to Jenny inside the store. Her posture was stiff. Morgan's expression sharpened. Inside, the saleslady approached with a practiced sneer. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, arms crossed. "You are not allowed to just take a shoe and try it on." Jenny stopped twirling and slowly turned to face the voice, her smile fading. "Don't worry. They're just my size," she replied calmly, until she saw the woman's face. Her tone dropped. "Anna," she said, with a note of disgust. Anna gave her a once-over, eyes scanning the cardigan that masked the high-end dress, then flicking to the flats on the floor, designer, but outdated. Probably from a clearance rack, she thought. "You need to take those off," Anna snapped. Jenny narrowed her eyes. "And what if I don't want to?" Anna scoffed. "Oh, please. A person like you would need to work a whole month just to afford those. They're $3,000. Jenny gave a cold laugh. "Is that all? That's practically chump change." Mandy knew this girl well from her past life. Anna used to brag about working as a personal shopper, about her commissions and the manipulative sales tactics they used. One favorite? Reverse psychology, treat the customer like dirt. If they turn out to be wealthy, they'll spend even more just to prove a point. But Mandy wasn't going to slap her with money. She slapped her across the face. Gasps rippled through the boutique. Phones came out. Several customers had begun recording the moment Jenny's hand connected with Anna's cheek. The manager rushed from the back. Staff froze, unsure whether to intervene. Morgan and Jake arrived just as the confrontation peaked. "What the hell is going on here?" Morgan's voice cut through the silence like a knife. The crowd parted, and the manager paled. "Mr. Lancaster, sir, I had no idea you were." Jenny turned to her husband, fury still simmering beneath her calm exterior. "Nothing, sweetheart," she said, removing the shoes and slipping back into her flats. "This store's customer service is a joke." Then she held up the sparkling heels and turned back to Anna. "You want me to spend money here? Don't try to trick me with your garbage tactics. Show me some respect, and I'll gladly empty your shelves." Morgan's eyes lingered on the shoes in her hand. Without a word, he pulled out his phone and sent a message to Jake. "Buy them. Same pair. From another store. Before dinner." Jake gave a nod and walked away silently, already pulling up store directories on his phone. Jenny exited the store and headed straight to a nearby cafe kiosk. She sat down on a bench with a coconut-flavored smoothie, slowly sipping the cold drink as the adrenaline cooled in her veins. Morgan approached a moment later, adjusting his cuff. "Sweetheart, go on ahead. I need to drop by the office for a bit. I'll see you at dinner." Jenny gave a nod and slid the van door open. It pulled away quietly. Morgan stood there for a beat, then turned, leaving Jake behind to complete the mission. He had no intention of letting his wife walk away from that store empty-handed, not after the way she stood her ground. The heavy glass doors of Lancaster Corp hissed open, welcoming Morgan back with sterile air and the faint scent of expensive polish and pressure. He walked through the lobby without a word, nodding only once to the receptionist who barely met his gaze, too intimidated to say hello. His shoes echoed against the floor as he ascended to the top floor, his sanctuary, his battlefield. The office welcomed him like an old ghost. Floor-to-ceiling windows cast cold daylight across his desk, where stacks of documents and signed contracts awaited like accusations. He set his phone down, unbuttoned his coat, and stared at the papers. It should have been good news. It was good news. Morgan had just closed a major infrastructure deal that was supposed to finally push Lancaster Incorporated out of the red. A 3-year negotiation, sealed with a handshake and multiple signatures. But now, flipping through the documents, all he felt was dread. The frustration behind his calm eyes was mounting. It was happening again. No matter how hard he worked, no matter how meticulous the strategy or how aggressive the campaign, Lancaster refused to rise. It was like trying to drag a stone uphill with a fraying rope. Collin Corporation, on the other hand, thrived under his leadership. The profits soared. The press called him a visionary. Investors smiled when he walked into the room. But Lancaster? Always one step forward, 2 steps back. Morgan tossed a signed memo onto the desk and leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. He'd done everything right. He cut the dead weight, hired new talent, even gave the board more transparency than ever. But no matter how well the numbers looked, something always cracked just before a breakthrough. A misshipment. A missed permit. A shipping delay caused by a freak weather pattern. An accident at a warehouse. A contract cancellation from a partner they'd had for a decade. It was uncanny. And people were starting to whisper. Maybe he's sabotaging Lancaster to favor his wife's company. After all, Collin Corp was still riding the golden wave, even during recessions, even during pandemic echoes, even when others stumbled. But Morgan knew the truth. Or at least, the version of it that haunted him now. It wasn't incompetence. Not from his team. Not from him. It was something else, an invisible weight dragging Lancaster down, a cosmic counterbalance that tipped the scale the moment something went right. He thought about Jenny, the first time. Her death had been the beginning of the real fall. The day she overdosed, everything unraveled. The investors pulled back. The deals vanished. Collin Corp was seized from him by the board, grief made him vulnerable, and they took full advantage. Now he was back. Time had given him a second chance. A cruel miracle. He had secured the deal again. A win. A hard-won one. But here he was, strapping in, waiting for the backlash. He didn't know what it would be this time. But it was coming. It always did. Morgan rubbed the bridge of his nose, then leaned forward and tapped a single line into his tablet for his assistant. Double-check shipping routes and partner contracts. Expect disruption. Prepare contingency plans. He stared at the message for a moment, then hit send. The curse, or whatever it was, wasn't going to take him by surprise. Not this time. The golden light outside faded into dusk as Morgan stepped out of the Lancaster building, his tailored coat billowing slightly in the wind. The black car was already waiting at the curb. Jake stood beside it, sharp as always, holding a shopping bag with silver rope handles. Without a word, Jake handed it over. Morgan peered inside. Pink and silver. Rhinestones. The right pair. He nodded once, satisfied. Good work, he murmured. Jake gave a small smile and opened the passenger door for himself, letting Morgan slip into the back. As the car merged into traffic, the city lights began to flicker to life outside the windows. A comfortable silence settled between them, well worn from years of practice. It had been 5 years now. Morgan had gone through 4 secretaries in 3 months before Jake walked in. He hadn't been applying for the job, just happened to be in the wrong place when the last one blew up at a client and cost the company a contract. Morgan had been furious. On edge. trying to pull Lancaster Incorporated out of its downward spiral. He saw Jake across the room, quiet, composed, watching the disaster unfold with a detached kind of calm. Without thinking, Morgan had pointed at him and ordered him to follow. HR scrambled to adjust the paperwork. The staff placed bets on how long this one would last. A day? Maybe 2. Jake stayed. Through late nights and missed meals, through paperwork avalanches and boardroom politics. He stayed. He never complained. Never flinched. He just adapted, quick, precise, steady. Morgan never said it aloud, but that was the first time he felt like he could breathe in the office again. Now, 5 years later, Jake could read him with a glance. "Is something wrong, sir?" Jake asked quietly from the front seat, watching the tension gathering in Morgan's shoulders. Morgan didn't answer at first. His gaze drifted to the window, to the steady blur of cars and neon signs. "I'm just bracing myself," he said finally, his voice low. "For whatever goes wrong this time." Jake gave a small exhale, not surprised. "Should we plant another money tree?" Morgan smirked, just barely. That old joke again. He hadn't believed in it at first. Said he wasn't superstitious. But when the setbacks kept coming, when every win was countered with a loss, Jake brought in a tiny money tree and set it in the lobby. Morgan rolled his eyes. 2 days later, one appeared on every floor. And when Jake suggested a feng shui expert, Morgan scoffed again, but called her anyway. She walked through the whole building, gave it a clean bill of energetic health, and left. Nothing changed. The company kept crawling, dragged by unseen hands. Morgan leaned back in his seat, the gift bag resting on his lap. It was always the same. Lancaster Incorporated would inch forward, sign a major contract, secure a powerful investor, only to be yanked 2 steps back by shipping delays, warehouse accidents, or partners pulling out at the last second. He could manage Collin Corporation flawlessly. It climbed higher each quarter. But his family's company, his name, remained chained to the floor. He had started to believe it was something else entirely. A weight the universe refused to lift. The car slowed as they neared home. Morgan glanced at the shoes again. They sparkled, innocent and beautiful, meant to bring joy. He hoped they still would. Because deep down, he knew the universe was watching. And it was already picking what to take away. Chapter 8. It was already dark when Morgan and Jake pulled into the Lancaster estate. The path lights lit the driveway in soft gold, casting long shadows against the trimmed hedges. As the car slowed to a stop, the front doors opened. Jenny was already waiting. She greeted Morgan with a kiss on the cheek, her bare feet silent against the polished floors. "I got you something," he said, holding up the sleek shopping bag. They moved to the living room. Jenny sat on the edge of the couch, pulled out the black box, and opened it. There it was, the pink and silver shoe she had dreamed of wearing since she saw it in a magazine. She lifted it with a quiet reverence, her eyes gleaming before narrowing ever so slightly. "Wait, did you get this from that store?" Before Morgan could answer, Jake raised a hand from behind. "Nope. I did a whole lap around the mall. That one's from a boutique 2 floors down. They had one last pair in your size." Jenny's suspicious smile softened. She leaned over, kissed her husband again on the cheek, and whispered, "Thank you." After dinner, as they sat quietly in the reading room, Morgan with a folder in hand and Jenny curled up on the other end of the couch, her eyes drifted toward him. "You're thinking too loudly," she said, watching the crease between his brows. Morgan exhaled, closing the folder. "It's the new project. Everything looks perfect on paper, but I can't shake the feeling that something's going to crash." "Why?" she asked, her tone soft but curious. He hesitated. "Because it always does. I get 1 step forward, and something, always something, knocks us 2 steps back. The Lancaster side of the business is cursed, if I'm being honest." Jenny tilted her head. "Then let it try. We're still here, aren't we?" He didn't answer. He just stared at her for a long moment, quietly grateful for the strange comfort she brought, even when things were uncertain. Later that night, they lay in bed together, their limbs tangled beneath the covers. Morgan, half asleep, felt her stir beside him. Then the trembling started. Jenny's breath hitched in uneven sobs. Her eyes were wide open, fixed on the ceiling, but unseeing. Her lips moved, silent at first, then a faint cry escaped her lips. Morgan didn't move to wake her. He'd learned by now that trying to rouse her only made it worse. Instead, he pulled her gently closer, wrapping an arm around her waist and burying his hand in her hair. "It's okay," he whispered. "I'm here. I've got you." She didn't hear him, but he said it anyway. Again and again, until the shaking slowed. She finally quieted in his arms, but even as her breathing steadied, Morgan remained wide awake, staring at the ceiling. The deal he had closed that day flashed in his mind. The numbers. The signatures. The congratulations. And somewhere in the back of his thoughts, that now familiar fear stirred. What will it cost this time? The Lancaster estate was abuzz early in the morning. After Morgan and Jake had left, whispers rippled through the household. A video had surfaced, one of the madam, sharp and composed, reprimanding a sales associate in a luxury store. The clip had already made its rounds among the staff. "Looks like the madam's finally learned how to blow a gasket," one of the maids remarked, still clutching her cleaning rag. "You think this is gonna be good or bad for us?" another asked, a little wary. Mandy, no, Jenny, overheard them as she walked past. "Would you have preferred if I lowered my head and cried pitifully instead?" she asked, her tone calm but laced with something sharp. "And no, ma'am." "Of course not," the maid stammered, caught off guard. Jenny let out a quiet sigh. "Honestly? Anger feels better than depression. Do it once, and it's over." Her voice was steady, but her mind was somewhere else. Mandy had skimmed through Jenny's memories like pages in a forgotten diary. The girl had been so quiet, so restrained. She never shared her thoughts, never offered an opinion. On the surface, everything about the Collin family looked pristine, even enviable. But behind closed doors? The silence was louder than any fight. Meanwhile, on the way to the office, Jake tapped on his phone and turned it toward Morgan. The screen showed the same video, the one of Jenny in the boutique. "Sir," Jake said carefully, "aren't you the least bit worried about Madam's sudden change? If she didn't have the same face, I'd think she was an entirely different person." Morgan kept his eyes on the road, but his jaw tightened. "It does seem different," he admitted. "But I'm glad she's finally speaking her mind. At least now I don't have to keep guessing what's going on in her head. I used to feel like I was always walking on eggshells, never sure if I'd said something wrong." In his past life, he barely had time to notice the signs. Jenny had suffered in silence, until one day, it was too late. Now, watching her stand up for herself, even if the shift was strange, Morgan couldn't help but feel relief. In the Lancaster estate, Jenny was bored of painting. So now she was stretched out on the living room sofa, scrolling through YouTube videos. She paused on one, a soft-voiced woman giving a tour of her garden. The camera panned across rose bushes, lavender paths, and archways laced with vines. Jenny sat up. Her eyes drifted to the large garden outside the Lancaster mansion. It was wide, well-kept, and soulless. Shrubs trimmed to geometric perfection, but not a hint of character. She got up and called out, "I'm going to the garden center." Nan, who'd been sorting laundry nearby, looked up. "Shall I come with you?" Jenny didn't protest. At the garden center, Jenny wore a rose-pink dress, a delicate gold and sapphire necklace, and a matching gold bracelet. On her feet were the pink and silver rhinestone shoes Morgan had gifted her. She paused by the gardenias, smiling as their heady fragrance wrapped around her. "Nan," she called softly. "Come smell this." Nan leaned in, eyes lighting up. Heavenly. They made their way to the rose section. Jenny knelt slightly to examine the soft petals of the pink and white David Austin roses, brushing a finger against them like they were silk. "These," she murmured. "And the yellow and white ones." Nan nodded approvingly. "The red ones are beautiful too. Would you like a photo to show Mr. Lancaster?" Jenny didn't object. She handed over her phone, standing quietly among the roses as Nan took a few shots. Inside the indoor section, a money tree caught her attention. "That would look nice at the entrance," Jenny said. "It's supposed to bring luck, right?" Nan squinted at the pot. "It's not big enough to stand between the two staircases." "But on a table?" "Yes. Maybe in a porcelain pot, something blue or gold." They walked toward the counter to arrange delivery. "I'd like these delivered to the Lancaster estate," Jenny said, pulling out a black credit card. The cashier looked up, and froze. Mandy froze too. It was Mark. Her ex. From before. He looked from her face to the card. "Is that a black card?" She gave a short, sarcastic smile. "First time seeing one?" Mark scratched the back of his neck. "Yeah, actually." Jenny's heart was thudding. She could feel it in her ears. But she didn't blink. She handed over the card like it weighed nothing. Mark rang her up and passed her an order form. "Just need your signature for delivery." She stared at the dotted line. She didn't know how Jenny signed her name. Her eyes flicked up to his face, too curious, too familiar, and her stomach twisted. "Don't you have a truck?" she snapped. "Why do I have to wait a whole day to start planting?" Mark blinked. "We usually schedule next day." "Then don't. Get a truck and follow us. Now." She turned sharply and walked toward the exit. Nan hurried behind her, arms full of impulse buys and a slightly shocked expression. In the car, Nan looked over, hesitant. "Miss Jenny, everything all right?" Jenny didn't answer. Her jaw was tight. The pink roses, the rhinestone shoes, the soft perfume, they all felt like a costume now. She wasn't Jenny. And someone had just seen through the cracks. Somewhere on the other side of town. Celine sat in a posh cafe tucked in one of the trendier districts, sipping her iced Americano as her friends huddled around her phone. They erupted in laughter watching a viral video of Jenny James Colin Lancaster, the country's wealthiest woman and now social media darling, putting a snobbish sales associate in her place with cold precision. "She's savage," one of them snorted. "Did you see how she just stared her down?" "The woman practically apologized mid-breath," another added. Celine forced a laugh, her jaw tight. "It's just the internet. People eat up drama, that's all." She adjusted the only scarf she wore, trying to shield her face, partly from the attention, partly from the sting of public disgrace. Her agent had told her to lay low. Ever since that other viral clip, Morgan Lancaster coldly reprimanding her in public, outright accusing her of trying to ruin his marriage, her modeling agency had put her on unofficial probation. The worst part? She called Morgan to get him to clear the air with the press, tell them it was all a misunderstanding. He didn't just ignore her call. He blocked her. Blocked her like she was some crazy ex-girlfriend. Which, to be fair, maybe she was starting to sound like. She stared at her phone with a mix of disbelief and humiliation. "We were friends, Morgan," she muttered bitterly. "We grew up together." They had been childhood friends. She was there before all the success. Back when Lancaster Incorporated was just a fading name barely clinging to prestige. They broke up in college, not because of a fight, but because of distance, expectations, and his mother. Celine scoffed under her breath. Lady Lancaster, always so composed, always so cunning. When their business was crumbling, she still walked into every gala like she owned the world. Celine had seen right through it. She remembered when word first spread about Mr. and Mrs. Collins' plane crash. The entire country mourned, but Celine had pitied Jenny most of all. Still a teenager, not even in college. Orphaned overnight. Celine had known that pain. Her own father died when she was just a girl, and her grandmother and uncle swooped in like vultures. Kicked her and her mother out of their home, seized the assets, the shares, the inheritance. The only thing they were left with was a modest pension. Her mother begged them to let Celine finish her education. They grudgingly paid for her prep school tuition. That's where she dated Morgan. It was like a teenage dream. He was the golden boy. She was the girl from a disgraced family. For a while, it was perfect. Until she failed to get into one of the country's top 10 universities. Her family cut her off for good. Morgan went to one of the best schools in the world. His mother whispered in his ear that he needed someone more fitting. She ended up in community college. Alone. But she had a pretty face. The kind photographers liked. One runway show turned into a campaign. Then another. Celine clawed her way up. So when the news broke that Jenny Collin, the girl everyone pitied, had inherited everything, Celine didn't know what to feel. Collin Corporation. The estate. The stocks. Even the mansion. All in Jenny's name. And then, she married Morgan. Morgan. Her Morgan. Celine had been scrolling on her phone when the wedding announcement dropped. She had to read the headline 3 times. CEO of Lancaster Incorporated marries Jenny Collin in private ceremony. It felt like the wind had been knocked out of her. They reconnected shortly after, mostly in professional circles. Morgan claimed it was a business marriage. That Jenny needed protection. That the company was unstable after the crash. That it wasn't love. But now he blocked her. Now he was playing husband of the year. Now he ran her company. The resentment started like a crack, but it grew. At a private gala hosted by one of the country's top industrialists, she spotted them again. Jenny and Morgan. Newly married. Glowing. Jenny didn't even recognize her. Of course, they'd only seen each other at parties growing up. Celine was 5 years older, always at the big kids' table. But she remembered one party vividly, one hosted by her uncle. Jenny was maybe 10, already being praised for her wit and manners. Celine had stood in the corner, forgotten. Now that same girl had everything. Smart. Loved. Married to Morgan. Living in luxury. While Morgan ran her family's company, Jenny stayed home, barefoot in a marble kitchen like a queen. She didn't even finish college. She doesn't deserve him, Celine whispered once, tipsy on champagne, to a fellow model. She doesn't deserve any of it. And it only got worse. Lancaster Incorporated had stagnated. Celine could see it in the numbers. She tried bringing it up to Morgan once over lunch. "You're overextending," she said gently. "You're pouring everything into Collin Corporation, and Lancaster is slipping. Why not hire someone else to manage Collin Corporation? Focus on your own company." Morgan didn't even blink. "It's my wife's company," he said. "It's my responsibility." Jenny didn't have to ask him. He just did it. Like some noble knight pledging fealty to a queen. And that burned more than anything. Because Celine had spent her life earning what she had. Jenny had it gifted to her. Chapter 9. Morgan glanced at his phone when it buzzed. A message from Jenny. He opened it, finding a picture of her among the roses at the garden center, the sunlight casting a soft glow over her. Found the perfect roses at the garden center. He smiled, his thumb hovering over the screen as he typed, then sent, "I can't wait to see them." For a moment, he just stared at the image, the quiet simplicity of it grounding him. The sound of his assistant entering snapped him out of his thoughts. He set the phone down, his gaze lingering on the picture one last time before shifting back to the stack of papers in front of him. Mandy stood in the garden, arms crossed, a furrow forming on her brow. Playing the memory of how Jenny wrote her signature, her mind replaying the elegant, flowing movements of each letter over and over. But every time, something felt off. She felt a twinge of frustration. Jenny had a way of doing everything so perfectly. Her mind wandered back to the task at hand. She heard the gardener calling out to her, though she didn't register the words immediately. He was asking about spacing the roses. "Madam," he repeated, "we should space them further apart. They'll need room to grow." Mandy blinked, snapping out of her thoughts. She didn't reply immediately, instead replaying Jenny's signature in her head, trying to mimic it with her mind's eye. "Should I space them further apart?" the gardener asked again, his tone more insistent. Mandy shook her head and mumbled an absent "yeah." She heard Nan's voice call from the veranda, cutting through her concentration. "Orange juice, dear," Nan said, a familiar warmth in her voice. Reluctantly, Mandy headed toward the umbrella and sat, sipping from her glass. "I need a pen and my sketchbook," she said, sinking down beside her. Nan raised an eyebrow but nodded and went inside to fetch it. As the gardener continued working, Mandy watched him move, planting the roses with careful precision. She tried to focus but couldn't help replaying Jenny's memories. Jenny, she realized, had never really cared about gardening. She'd only ever told the gardener where to plant the flowers, never involving herself in the labor. She shook her head and sighed, pulling the sketchbook closer when Nan returned with it. She flipped through the pages, pretending to sketch the roses while quietly practicing Jenny's signature in the margins. Each line felt alien, but she kept at it, trying to lock it into muscle memory. The gardener's voice broke her concentration again. "We need to give them some room to grow." Mandy nodded, only half listening. "How long will it take them to mature?" she asked, distracted. "Probably till fall," the gardener replied, "then they'll die off when winter comes. But they're strong. They'll hold out." Mandy glanced at him, a slight nod of understanding. "Right." She began sketching the roses again, but this time, her mind floated elsewhere. The memories of Jenny playing piano drifted through her head, soft and distant. Mandy paid the memory of Jenny sit at the grand piano when she was younger, the way her fingers danced across the keys with practiced grace. Mandy herself wanted to take piano lessons when she was young, but her family couldn't afford the expense. The thought lingered, tugging at something deep inside her. Her eyes scanned the garden again, before she noticed an ad on her phone for an app that promised to teach piano. Her heart skipped, a spark of interest flaring. Maybe it was time to try it, perhaps it would help her connect even more with the life she was inhabiting, to become more like Jenny, step by step. But for now, her signature was her focus. Her pen scratched the page, blending memory with imitation. Meanwhile, back at the Lancaster building, sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows as Jake stepped in. "Sir, the next meeting is ready." "Should I bring him in?" Morgan nodded. "Yes." "Send him in." A moment later, a young man entered, extending his hand confidently. "Mr. Lancaster, thank you for seeing me. I'm Daniel Reyes, founder of Finsight." Morgan shook his hand. "Finsight? That name rings a bell." Daniel smiled. "It's an AI-driven financial advisor app. We're aiming to democratize personal finance by providing real-time, tailored investment advice to users." Morgan gestured for him to sit. "Go on." Daniel opened his tablet, displaying charts and projections. "Our app analyzes user data to offer personalized investment strategies. Think of it as having a financial advisor in your pocket. We've seen a 40% month-over-month growth and are currently seeking $2 million in funding to scale our operations." Morgan leaned back, considering. Impressive growth. But the market is saturated. What sets Finsight apart? Daniel tapped on his tablet, bringing up a comparison chart. "Unlike our competitors, we focus on underserved demographics, offering micro-investment opportunities and educational resources. Our AI model continuously learns from user behavior to improve recommendations." Morgan nodded slowly. "I remember hearing about Finsight years ago. I never got the chance to meet you then." Daniel looked curious. "Oh." Morgan waved it off. "Long story. Let's focus on the present. What's your valuation?" We're currently valued at $10 million post-money, Daniel replied. Morgan steepled his fingers. I'm interested. But I want a 20% stake for $2 million. Daniel hesitated. That's a bit steep. We were offering 15% for that amount. Morgan's gaze was steady. I bring more than just capital. My network, experience, and resources can accelerate your growth beyond projections. Daniel considered this, then nodded. All right. 20% it is. Morgan extended his hand. Deal. The door clicked shut behind Daniel Reyes, leaving Morgan alone in the office once more. For a few moments, silence filled the space, broken only by the faint ticking of the antique clock on the wall and the distant hum of city traffic. Morgan leaned back in his chair, his lips curling into a rare, satisfied smile. He reached for the sleek pen resting beside the signed agreement and tapped it lightly against the table. 20% for $2 million. He had practically stolen it. He knew Finsight's trajectory by heart. It was one of the few names he'd watched rise from nothing to a tech empire in his past life. It would triple its valuation in less than 2 years. Maybe more. Morgan's eyes flicked to the folder lying open on his desk, then to the screen of his phone still lit with Jenny's photo. The contrast wasn't lost on him: life, business, memory, future. All converging. Not bad, he murmured under his breath, a trace of amusement tugging at his tone. Not bad at all. He turned his chair toward the window, the skyline gleaming in the afternoon sun. For the first time in a long while, he felt ahead of the curve, like he was finally playing the game on his terms. Scene: Lancaster Estate, evening. The grand doors of the Lancaster estate opened with a soft creak as Morgan stepped inside, loosening the collar of his shirt. He paused, his gaze catching on something new. A money tree, vibrant and glossy, sat right in the center of the entrance between the two sweeping staircases. Its green leaves seemed to glow under the chandelier light. He didn't remember approving that, but it was the sort of thing Jenny would do. Symbolic, thoughtful. Before he could dwell on it, footsteps echoed from the hallway. Jenny appeared, her dress light and casual, hair tied loosely at the nape of her neck. She was dusted with remnants of the garden, barely noticeable to most, but Morgan's eyes were sharp. There was something off. The way she held her arm, the faint smudge of soil near her wrist. And then, the look. Subtle, but strained. You hurt yourself? He asked, walking toward her. Out there planting all day? Jenny blinked, then smiled, too quickly. No, she said lightly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Just tired from digging holes all day. I didn't expect gardening to be that intense. Morgan raised an eyebrow but didn't press. Since when do you actually dig? She laughed softly, a practiced sound. Trying new things. He gave a small nod, glancing once more at her hands. Something didn't quite add up. Inside her mind, Mandy was spiraling. Her fingers ached from unfamiliar labor, and her anxiety simmered beneath Jenny's serene expression. The moment Morgan had walked through the door, she'd tensed, not just because of the gardening lie, but because she'd just discovered another problem. Not only could she not replicate Jenny's signature, she couldn't match her handwriting either. Every letter she tried to copy came out slightly wrong, either too rigid or too loose. It didn't flow with Jenny's effortless script, the kind that came from years of perfecting compositions and writing sheet music by hand. She was an accomplished pianist, after all. Mandy's facade didn't crack, but the pressure was building. Morgan stepped closer and gently took her hand, inspecting the smudge of dirt near her fingernails. His touch was warm, familiar. He glanced up at her. Just, be careful, he said softly. I don't want you getting hurt over a few roses. Mandy, nodded, smiling again. That night, after Morgan and Jenny drifted off to sleep, Mandy drifted into, the darkness behind her eyes gave way, not to dreams, but to memory. She was a little girl again. Small limbs, messy blonde hair, crouched low inside the cluttered closet of the bedroom she shared with her younger brother. The air smelled of old carpet and sweat, and her little hands clutched a cracked flashlight like it was a lifeline. Through the narrow crack of the closet door, she could just make out the shapes in the dim room. Her brother sat on the floor, cross-legged, humming to himself as he clumsily moved his toy truck back and forth. His world was a little quieter than hers. He didn't seem to notice the shouting. Or maybe, he just didn't understand it. Outside the locked bedroom door, their mother screamed, sharp, hoarse, broken. Then came the crash. The sound of something ceramic shattering against the floor. A heavy thud followed, shaking the walls. Mandy flinched and pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. She knew what came next. The footsteps. Her father's voice booming, slurred, furious. The bedroom door rattled violently. Open the damn door. Mandy ducked her head, squeezing her eyes shut as the door shook again under a shoulder slam. The lock gave out with a splintering crack. The door burst open. He stood there, breathing hard, his broad frame filling the doorway. His eyes scanned the room before narrowing on the only one visible. Her brother. Still sitting on the carpet, truck in hand. "You little freak," he growled, storming in. Without warning, he grabbed the boy by the back of his shirt and yanked him off the floor. Mandy's eyes went wide, her body frozen in place behind the closet door, the sliver of light painting her pale face in shadow. Her breath caught in her throat. Stop. Stop. He didn't do anything, she wanted to scream. But she stayed silent. Just like always. Her father's voice roared again, unintelligible this time, and the sound of skin meeting skin echoed as the memory blurred, the fear peaking. Mandy's little body curled tighter in the dark, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. And then she woke up. A few hours after they had fallen asleep, Morgan stirred at the sound of Jenny's breathing, sharp, shallow, and unsteady. He opened his eyes to find hers already wide open, blank and staring into the dark. At first, he thought it was just another night terror. She usually cried quietly in her sleep, her body curling inward, tears sliding down her cheeks while her voice barely rose above a whisper. But this time was different. Her hands trembled. Her breathing grew louder, uneven. Then suddenly, she screamed, loud, raw, and filled with terror. Morgan bolted upright. Jenny. She shot off the bed and ran toward the corner of the room, crouching down like a frightened animal, her back pressed against the wall, arms shielding herself from something unseen. He was on his feet in an instant, heart pounding. Jenny, it's me. It's okay. You're safe. But she didn't hear him. Or if she did, it didn't register. Her eyes darted around the room, wide and unfocused. She looked trapped. Morgan hesitated. He had known by now, not to wake her. Waking someone in the middle of a night, terror could cause more harm than good. Disorientation. Panic. Even aggression. Most people didn't remember them once they passed. They were just supposed to ride it out. But this wasn't like before. She wasn't crying. She was screaming. Shaking. He made a choice. Jenny, he said firmly, crossing the room, it's okay. You're dreaming. He gently reached for her shoulders, giving her a slight shake. Wake up. Her screams caught in her throat. She blinked, gasping as if she'd just surfaced from underwater. Confusion filled her face, then exhaustion. Trembling, she looked at him like she wasn't entirely sure who he was. You're safe, he repeated, pulling her into his arms. She didn't speak. Her body was tense, and even when he got her back into bed, she didn't fall asleep again. She just stared at the ceiling in silence while Morgan stayed beside her, rubbing small circles on her back, wondering what kind of memories haunted her so deeply, and why they were getting worse.